Hey, this is Urbina, and tune into the relay for the latest news in boxing all around the world. Thank you for supporting myself and other female boxers. We truly appreciate it.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Late last week, at the WBA's KO on Drugs Festival in Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Ese aire está bueno.
The women's WBA super flyweight title ended up changing hands the way I said it might end up changing hands, from Maribel Ramirez of Mexico to unbeaten Clara Lescuratt of Argentina. That's right, a new champion in the women's super flyweight division has been crowned, and
this is a division that needs fresh faces, new faces.
Ambitious ones. Clara Lescuratt, who sports professional record of 7 wins, no losses, and no draws, effectively became this division's WBA champion in under 10 fights, having won a split decision over Maribel Ramirez.
We've seen 2 newly crowned champions at this weight within the last 12 months.
Last week, we saw Clara Lescuratt pry the WBA title away from long-reigning champion Maribel Ramirez. Before that, we saw Japan's own Tamao Ozawa pry the WBO title away from then-reigning champion Miyo Yoshida. That's 2 newly crowned champions in the women's super flyweight division having been crowned within the last 12 months. This is a division that sorely needs new blood, new faces, new talents. Shortly after the fight, we saw a very familiar face, a very familiar fighter, call for a fight with Clara Lescuratt. Mexico's own Urbina, having faced Clara Lescuratt in the amateurs and having at least one recorded victory over her, Urbina took to social media, tagged the WBA, calling for a fight between them, calling for a fight between her and the newly crowned, unbeaten WBA champion. I like the sound of that, and it's confirmation of what I thought. I anticipated that Urbina may be attempting to integrate herself into today's super flyweight division, a division that sorely needs a shot in the arm.
It needs new blood.
Seems to be getting it by way of the WBA, by way of the WBC, movement on the ground. It appears that East LA's own Adelaida Ruiz will be taking on Sonia Osorio for the second time by way of a Marv Nations promotion.
That rematch is supposed to go down later on next month on the 29th.
The second installment of what was their initial meeting in March of last year, a fight that ended in a draw. A technical draw after just 2 rounds of action that brought the contest to a screeching halt. Over a year ago, these 2 fighters locked horns, but the contest between them only lasted 2 rounds. There was an accidental clash of heads. Ringside doctor took one look at the condition of Sonia Osorio and decided to wave this thing off, so there was no outcome. And the interim title didn't change hands. I anticipate that if Adelaida Ruiz is able to win interim status from Sonia Osorio, the WBC's interim champion, she will look to challenge the reigning WBC champion, Lourdes Juarez,
the full champion who holds the full WBC title.
Adelaida Ruiz has seen action at least two times since her initial meeting with Sonia Osorio over a year ago, kept herself in the winner's bracket and her unbeaten record intact. Sonia, she hasn't been as lucky.
Sonia lost her last fight.
Sonia's only fought once since the Adelaida Ruiz fight, March of last year, and she suffered a decision loss to Angela Nolasco down there at flyweight. It doesn't seem to have affected her status as super flyweight WBC interim champion.
Thus, her rematch with Adelaida still is for the WBC super flyweight interim title.
So when it comes to that second fight, that rematch set to go down July 29th, I like Adelaida Ruiz's chances. She has very generous physical dimensions for this division, and she's a hard puncher.
Those girls from East Los can fight. Sinicia Estrada's a perfect example.
I like Adelaida Ruiz to become this division's WBC interim champion on July 29th, and she would presumably move on from that to challenge the reigning full champion of Mexico, Lourdes Juarez. That's a fight that will require more thought. When it comes to Urbina pursuing a fight with Clara Lescuratt, this division's newly crowned WBA champion, I like Sulem's chances. She has her experience against Clara in the amateurs to draw from, and as a professional, she's got a lot more experience than Clara.
Don't forget, Clara Lescuratt, newly crowned champion and all, she doesn't even have 10 professional fights yet.
It's great that she's become a champion after just 6 or 7 professional fights, but it doesn't make for the most experienced or seasoned fighter. And Urbina, she is seasoned. She's been in there with Marlon Esparza. She's been in in there with Naoko Fujioka. These are better fighters than Maribel Ramirez. Even if those situations didn't work out, Sulem will have those experiences to draw from in tandem with the mental edge of actually having faced Clara before.
She fought her in the amateurs. She beat her in the amateurs.
Given these circumstances, she could very well beat her in the pros. Sulem was supposed to have been in action earlier this month on the 11th, but that fight fell through. I believe they couldn't find Sulem an opponent, though she is set to return to action in August. She's supposed to be taking on Ecuadorian journeywoman Josep Vizcaíno in what is a 6-rounder. Beyond this fight, should Sulem win, the way I think she's going to win, I would imagine she's going to pursue that Clara Lescuratt title fight vigorously. Being said, there's movement on the ground in the women's super flyweight division. Look for Ruiz versus Osorio 2 early next month and Urbina versus Vizcaíno in August. In men's heavyweight news, per tweet from Michael Benson, Anthony Joshua, on what his corner told him during the Oleksandr Usyk fight, I swear, I thought I was winning. I thought I was looking like Muhammad Ali in there. I didn't get any impression that I was losing. That's when they announced Usyk's name, and I was kind of like, huh?
Did Rob McCracken give Anthony Joshua a false representation of the fight during the fight?
Can we really say that's what costed Anthony Joshua the victory? Can we really say that that was the determining factor in that fight? Well, at minimum, it could have. It very well could have had its role to play, because a lot of people feel that Anthony Joshua just didn't do enough in that fight. Didn't use enough of his size, didn't use enough of his power, wasn't aggressive enough. He found himself fencing with the naturally smaller man, playing the naturally smaller man's game.
He didn't seem to be fighting with a sense of urgency.
Could Rob McCracken giving him a false representation of things in the corner during the fight, could that be the reason? Sounds a lot like it. It's neither here nor there.
Because Rob McCracken's not in his corner anymore. Robert Garcia is.
Veteran trainer Robert Garcia, trained a world champion or two. I imagine that Anthony Joshua brought him on to help him be a more physical, rough and tumble fighter.
Yeah.
Winning the chess match, the cerebral boxing match, you tried that and that didn't work. You're going to need to approach this from another angle.
You bring on Robert Garcia, I get the impression you want to be more of a mid-range to inside guy in this fight.
As opposed to a mid-range to outside guy staying behind your jab, fencing with it.
Getting full extension on that arm and attempting to manage the distance. In this fight, I expect that Anthony will look to close it.
Close the gap and step into that jab to bring over hard shots upstairs, hard shots downstairs, uppercuts that split the guard. I expect that Anthony Joshua will let go of more uppercuts in the second fight than he did in the first. It could make all the difference. Don't forget, these are the big boys. These are heavyweights. One shot can finish a fight.
And when you're crowding the other guy, him being a southpaw don't mean as much.
That is, if you can get close to him. His jab coming over the top of yours isn't as much of a factor when you're not looking to spend the next 12 rounds jabbing with the guy.
Anthony Joshua's got a lot riding on this fight, and so does DAZN.
Further insights on that situation, Eddie Hearn revealed that the rights to the fight are owned by the Saudis that are financing it. And it looks a lot like what they're doing is auctioning off those rights to the highest bidder, though you must also question.
DAZN might still end up showing the fight, you understand?
Yeah, they might. They might very well be in the running to still show the fight on their platform.
Yeah.
You have to understand, Anthony Joshua, beyond this fight, which isn't part of his newly signed deal, he's supposed to be boxing exclusively on DAZN, beyond the Usyk rematch. And what you have to ask yourself is how many broadcasters out there in the United Kingdom, in the United States, are going to want to pay through the nose just to show Joshua versus Usyk 2 when, beyond that fight, neither one of those guys are going to be boxing on their platforms.
At least Anthony Joshua isn't.
In my previous video, we talked about how the Saudis own the rights to this fight and how they appear to be auctioning off those rights and the possibility that the fight could land on a Sky in the UK or an ESPN in the US. We talked about that.
And those are distinct possibilities. It is possible.
So it's also possible that these competing platforms that compete with DAZN, they're not going to want to pay through the nose to show a fight between two fighters they don't have under contract. They don't have Anthony Joshua under contract. They don't have Oleksandr Usyk under contract. So how much of their own resources are they willing to shell out just to show one fight between two guys they ain't got under contract?
That's a legitimate question.
What would showing that fight on their platform be worth to them? What would it be worth to ESPN here in America? What would it be worth to Sky over there in the United Kingdom? Yes, it's a big fight. It's a very big fight.
It's going to bring in a lot of global attention. It's going to bring in a lot of money.
Adam Smith over there at Sky Sports, expressed his disappointment that Anthony Joshua would not be boxing on his platform anymore. So what's it worth to Adam to show Anthony Joshua's latest fight, one of his most important fights?
Is he willing to pay to play?
Is he willing to do what he's got to do to show that fight on Sky, even if he knows that moving forward, Anthony Joshua won't be boxing on his platform? Is he willing to do what he's got to do to show that fight on his platform, knowing that Usyk might pop up somewhere else?
Is he willing to do what he's got to do to get the rights for that fight on Sky, knowing that he doesn't have either guy under contract? And those same questions apply to the people at Showtime here in America and the people at ESPN.
How much of their own money are they willing to spend when it's a one-off situation? It's a one-off kind of deal. Yeah, you show that fight and that fight does well, but beyond that,
like I said, it's a legitimate question that needs to be asked.
this is high stakes. High stakes for Usyk, high stakes for Anthony Joshua, high stakes for Matchroom.
See how it checks out.
We'll see on what platform and what countries this fight gets shown. Men's super middleweight and light heavyweight news per tweet from Michael Benson. Eddie Hearn says, I think Artur Beterbiev is an easier fight for Canelo Alvarez than Dmitry Bivol. Stylistically, Bivol beats Beterbiev. We talked about this in my previous video and how I think that Eddie Hearn is only half right in this conversation, half right about these comments. Stylistically, Dmitry Bivol is a peskier guy, possesses a peskier style for the likes of a Canelo Alvarez because he's going to minimize Canelo Alvarez's...
Going to minimize his ability to land punches.
That right there, that particular element of the fight boils down to the stylistic matchup, the styles of the fighters. Dmitry Bivol's no gunslinger. He's a cerebral kind of fighter. Fights on the balls of his feet, stays on the move.
Defensively responsible.
You don't throw caution to the wind for offense, and that's what makes him a pesky fighter, makes it a pesky fight, a pesky-based style for a naturally smaller fighter moving up in weight like a Canelo Alvarez. That bit of it, that element, that boils down to the style.
Dmitry Bivol's base style lives somewhere between the pure boxer and the boxer puncher.
Whereas Canelo Alvarez's base style lives somewhere between the boxer puncher and the pressure fighter, though he really has been more the pressure fighter as of late than the boxer puncher.
And that accounts for the style of the fighters, the style of the fight, and what makes Dmitry Bivol a pesky opponent for Canelo.
But that just accounts for the style of the fighters and the style of the fight. What about the size? The physical dimensions of the fighters? Because in case you haven't forgotten, weight classes matter.
Yeah.
Size matters.
Yeah.
Don't let anybody tell you different. And I'm no Monday morning quarterback. I said this ahead of the fight. What makes Dmitry Bivol a more dangerous opponent than a Charlo, than an Andre, than even a David Benavidez is you're talking about a cerebral kind of fighter who's going to offset Canelo Alvarez's pressure, but
he's big enough and durable enough that what Canelo does land won't hurt him.
It won't make a dent because you're talking about a naturally smaller fighter moving up in weight to take on a career light heavyweight. A career light heavyweight in his prime. Dmitry Bivol is already a defensively responsible fighter. He's going to limit your opportunities to land clean.
But even if you can land clean, whatever you land, it's not going to make a dent.
Size matters. Ahead of this fight, I anticipated that Canelo Alvarez, he wouldn't be able to hurt Dmitry, wouldn't be able to knock him out. Maybe he can beat him on activity. Maybe he can beat him on volume. Maybe he can beat him on points by throwing more punches and giving off the appearance of being the busier fighter in the fight.
But he wasn't able to do that. Dmitry gave off the appearance of being the busier fighter because Canelo couldn't make a dent.
And that's where size has its role to play. That's where weight classes matter. Looks a lot to me like what Canelo Alvarez was expecting, is that his power would carry, that he would pack at least a big enough punch that over time, round by round, he'd be able to hurt Dmitry Bivol, and that didn't happen. And when that didn't happen,
that's when Canelo Alvarez was the one that was slowing down and starting to wilt.
And that doesn't make Canelo Alvarez a bad fighter, in spite of what the naysayers and the critics might want you to believe. It's not dissimilar from Chocolatito being one of the best super flyweights in the world, but not being quite cut out to campaign as a bantamweight or a super bantamweight. His skills are tried and true and proven.
Proven in 4 weight classes, but the higher up you go, you might bite off more than you could chew.
He really is arguably the best inside fighter in today's super flyweight division. Arguably one of the best mid-range to inside fighters in the world.
A lot of mid-range to inside fighters, a lot of close quarters guys and girls could learn a lot from Chocolatito.
But that doesn't mean he's cut out to campaign as a bantamweight, a super bantamweight, or a featherweight, because size matters, and you have to account for that. That's very much the case when it comes to Canelo Alvarez.
Not a true light heavyweight.
With Artur Beterbiev, it's a little different, though it's the same underlying principle. Canelo Alvarez may actually have the right style for the job, though not the size.
I told you, Canelo Alvarez's style lives somewhere between a boxer-puncher and a pressure guy.
For the most part, Artur Beterbiev has proven to be your, according to Hoyle, mid-range to inside pressure fighter. The advantage that the boxer-puncher has over the pressure fighter is that the boxer-puncher can alternate seamlessly from offense to defense by way of countershots, counter-punching. Pressure fighters are volume punchers. They throw a lot of punches, thus affording a boxer-puncher a lot of opportunities to get off countershots, to get off counter-punches. But what if your countershots, what if your counter-punches, they can't put a dent in the other guy? They don't get his respect. They don't stop him from coming forward. What happens then?
You get run the fuck over, that's what happens.
They want to count it against Canelo Alvarez's legacy so far that perhaps he doesn't have what it takes to make it as an upper echelon light heavyweight. They want to count it against Canelo Alvarez that maybe he ain't got what it takes to campaign at 175 pounds, which is silly.
That underlying principle is true for literally every boxer, that some mountains at times are too high to climb.
Their understanding of this sport seems to be something akin to a comic book based on their expectations. Size matters. It eventually does the higher up you go.
You know, Jorge Linares, a 3-division champion, one of the elite guys at lightweight.
It looks so elite 1 division north of lightweight at super lightweight against journeyman Pablo Cano, who made short work of him.
Remember, Jorge Linares was once a WBA and Ring Magazine lightweight champion. He was an upper echelon guy at that weight for a time.
But at super lightweight, he wasn't cut out to be up there. He was a fish out of water. That might be the case for Canelo Alvarez, and what Canelo is talking about is going back there, going back up to 175 pounds for a Dimitri Bivol rematch.
It's ill-advised because he doesn't have the physical dimensions of a true light heavyweight.
He'd be better off defending his undisputed crown beyond this Gennady-Golovkin trilogy, which I think he's going to win. I think he's going to stop Gennady. He'd be better off staying put, staying right there and defending his titles against the likes of Jermall Charlo, Demetrius Andrade, and David Benavidez. Easier fights to win than what awaits him up there at 175 pounds.
They've elevated Andrade to this mythical status just based on him not having fought Canelo yet.
Because Canelo's never fought a fucking southpaw before? What was Erislandy Lara? What was Austin Trout? More recently, what was Billy Joe Saunders? Billy Joe, who's got a better resume than Demetrius does.
They've done the same thing with Jermall Charlo. He's supposed to be some mythical matchup, some existential god.
It's a knockout waiting to happen. I say Canelo Alvarez stays at super middleweight and fights those guys. Bring them over to your designated platform because you're the A-side and we all know it.
If you want to fight, cross the street.
I'll tell you right now, he's got a better chance of beating Andrade than he does of beating Bivol in a rematch. He's got a better chance of beating Andrade than he does of beating Beterbiev if he goes up there. Andrade was put on his back pocket by Vanez Martirosyan. He struggled with a stumpy guy in Jack Colquet, and you think Canelo can't beat him?
I think he should stay at 68 and fight those guys.